Hi everyone, so today we're super excited to be having our 6th Women in Fencing panel. So today we're going to be talking about society-defined gender roles and how people can break through these barriers. So our inspiring panelists are going to share powerful stories of their struggles and triumphs in fighting bias and harassment. And we hope that today's panel will leave you with the strength to stand up for yourself and others. So today we're going to start with intros, and then we have some questions for our panelists. And then if we have time at the end, we will also try to get through as many questions from the audience as possible. We would like to thank all of our panelists for agreeing to speak with us and everyone in the audience for attending. So we'll start with the intros. So we're just going to share our screen really quickly. Okay. So our first awesome panelist is Monica Aksamit. She got bronze in the 2016 Olympics in women's saber in the team event. She also got gold in the 2019 Pan American Games, and she's a 9-time national team member. Our second amazing panelist is Molly Hill. She referees foil and epee at national events. She's an at-large board member for USA Fencing, and she is a USA CFC secretary, and she co-authored the W Fencing report card. Our next amazing panelist is Adriana Attar. She's an international referee in saber. She also fenced for Argentina for 10 years, and she's also a coach. Our next panelist is Lorrie Marcil Holmes. She's the at-large director for the USA Fencing Board of Directors. She's the chair of the ethics committee, and she's been involved in fencing for nearly 20 years. She's also a member of the audit committee and the international relations committee. Our next amazing panelist is Essene Waters. She's also an international referee, and she's an epee coach, and she was a competitive fencer for 14 years. I'm Malika. You can see some of my accomplishments below. I'm going to be moderating this panel. And I'm Keki. You can also see some of my accomplishments below, and then I'm also going to be moderating this panel. Okay. So we'll get started with some questions. Okay, so as women, we face a lot of expectations from society. We're expected to behave a certain way, dress a certain way, and look a certain way. And as women athletes, we face even more like criticism and scrutiny. So our first question is Monica. So you started fencing at a young age when most people expect like girls to wear tutus and bows, but you decided to pick up a sword. So how did that go?
I mean, it went normal. My mom was the one that brought me into practice. My first fencing coach was a client at the bank that she worked at, and he told her about the scholarship opportunities and all that stuff. So my mom brought me in. I, as a kid, actually never had any kind of, not that I remember at least. I mean, this feels like it was 100 years ago, not to date myself, but yeah, no, I didn't have an issue as a kid. I would say if anything, I had more comments later on in life. Like my mom came back after a certain point and she's like, you have a 6-pack. That's manly. Like you're so muscular. You don't look like a woman. And I was like, what are you even talking about? What? Because I'm strong. That all of a sudden makes me not look like a woman because I lift heavy things for you, not a woman. Like, what is that about? So that was pretty much the first time. But aside from that, I really didn't have any backlash as a kid.
Thank you so much for sharing. We also started fencing at a pretty young age, so when we were 9, and most people thought it was super cool, but sometimes people would ask our mom why she was allowing us to fence because they thought it would make us aggressive or something like that. So Lorrie, we would like to ask you, what were the reactions of others when Kat started fencing, especially epee, which supposedly wasn't a women's weapon at the time, and how were you able to support her?
I think all the reactions were very positive. People are always interested to this day, how did she get started in fencing? And so it's a great opportunity to share the stories and the opportunities that fencing has, including for women. You know, fencing was all Catherine's idea, and we were all in. We loved the sport. We loved all the people that we met. we never had any sense that epee was not so much a women's sport. I mean, there are so many women who fence epee, more women fence epee internationally than any other weapon currently. You know, Catherine, you know, I like the fact, and I think she did too, that unlike a lot of the sports she was doing when she was young at first, the boys and the girls trained together, you know, and I know Catherine would say, you know, because I asked her in preparing for this panel, you know, about this question, she said, well, you know, it was very empowering for me as I became a teenager to beat boys who were bigger and stronger in practice. So I think it gave her a lot of confidence. I think it gave her a lot of confidence about her body. You know, I feel like, so when I grew up, like you could not read an article about a woman that didn't start with her height and her weight. I'm not exaggerating. So I feel like sports are a wonderful vehicle for young women to develop really positive body image. And I think fencing is a great sport for that. So I could go on and on about why I think fencing is great for women, and there's a lot of opportunity there, but I'll stop now and let others talk too.
Thank you so much. So unlike Monica, Kat, and us, Adriana, you started fencing at a little bit later age, so you must have faced a different set of challenges. So were the people around you supportive of your decision to take up fencing?
Well, yeah, I guess they were, but also there was a sense of, okay, you'll leave it very soon because you won't make it. I mean, it's a very poor country, so it's like, but international, because there weren't many women doing saber at that time. Of course, if I 23 as I did in Italy, of course I wouldn't be in the team, but I was lucky. So I don't think I was supported by my family, by friends and everything, but also I didn't think they thought I would do it for like 10 years as I. So it was more of an age issue than gender issue.
Thank you so much, Adriana. So even though we still have some less women in the sport than men, at least now we have equal events for both women and men. But that's not the case for coaching and refereeing. And Molly, you worked on some reports for W Fencing, which makes this disparity clear. Can you share with us why you decided to work on this?
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for having me on this panel. So for those of you who don't know, W Fencing released a report last year studying the representation of women among American fencing professionals. So as they said, referees, coaches, etc. So I first attended a panel with Vinnie Bradford at Summer Nationals in 2019. And when I had a chance to work with the W Fencing team, I was really drawn to this report. I mean, I've always loved data and the power it can hold to make you realize something you hadn't before, right? So I worked with Vinnie and Addie Bergelet on the report where we essentially graded representation in USA Fencing, US Fencing Coaches Association, NCAA, and US Association of Collegiate Fencing Clubs. So to give you an explanation of the metrics, it's broken down into letter grades based on the percentage of women in different committees and groups. So an A+, you need 45% women, B 38, etc. Now, perfect equity of 50% is currently almost impossible for USA Fencing in particular, because only 35% of our membership is women. But many categories failed to reach even that threshold across the board. So first of all, as many of you know, not a single national coach is a woman. Referees, only 26% of new certifications are given to women. And in the Coaches Association, only 18% of certificates issued were to women. NCAA, similar numbers, even worse though. 8% of men's fencing teams have women head coaches and only 15% for women's teams. So overall, we took all these letter grades and calculated a quote unquote GPA, and it was only 1.83 out of 4. So the question then becomes, what can we do about it, right? We, in addition to the raw data, we outlined a number of proposed steps in 3 areas: encouraging leadership with role models and support, improving education and perceptions, and shifting hiring practices. So these can consist of mentorship programs, girls leading drills and clubs. And then for hiring, it's actually been shown that if there's only one woman in a candidate pool, the statistical likelihood of her being hired is actually 0. This was in the Harvard Business Journal, and it still blows my mind. So just starting with a diverse candidate pool can improve the chances down the road. So maybe USA Fencing could create a database of coaches, so there's no excuse from schools of, well, we don't know any women coaches who are qualified, right? Or even setting diversity requirements for hiring for local tournaments, snacks, or if you can't do it, because maybe there are 10 tournaments that weekend in the area, just prove that you tried. And so we want to run this every couple of years to measure our progress. But in the meantime, there's a lot of work to do. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of talk this last year and not much more, partially due to the pandemic and partially because while there have been great efforts, I love the diversity in the at-large nominees this year and today's announcement about the Leadership Academy, but it doesn't seem that all of USA Fencing recognizes the urgent need for diversity and representation or has taken this seriously. For example, we sent this document when we published it to the entire board of directors, and only Raquel, Chris, and Lorrie responded. So out of 13 board members, a president, and an executive director, 4 of which were women, only 3 responded to us, all of whom were women. And additionally, I was really excited about the creation of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, but I hope it wasn't just a token effort because it's really important. So hopefully USA Fencing will empower them to create the change we need.
Thanks so much, Molly. I think it's really important to sort of quantify the problem, and hopefully now we'll start seeing a change. So Essene, you were an athlete and then you decided to coach and referee. And as Molly's reports show, it's a field dominated by men. So what struggles have you faced while coaching and refereeing as a woman?
So first, I would like to thank both of you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. So thank you. To answer the question, my day job is also in a male-dominated field. So unfortunately, I was already familiar with and had some strategies to overcome the more routine instances of sexism. I will say that the struggle I have found unique to my experience in the world of fencing is the constant threat of sexual harassment and sexual assault. There is an almost complete lack of any consequences for instances of sexual assault and harassment. So the issue goes really largely unchecked. And some of you might be thinking, what about safe sport? Doesn't that help make the sport a safer place? And the answer to that is unfortunately, no, it does not. Many people treat the training and its implementation as a joke, and the complete lack of any oversight or any enforcement of those codes of conduct has really fostered an environment in which the process of filing a safe sport complaint is referred to as a waste of time and paper. And this culture really drastically contrasts to that in my professional field, where there is zero tolerance and transgressions are known to be met with real consequences from HR. I'm at a point now in refereeing where I have the opportunity to mentor incoming referees. And part of the standard orientation that I have to give to female referees is having to tell them that it is likely not a question of if someone will attempt to sexually assault them, but rather when and how. And having to caution them against being alone in situations that should be safe, like getting into an elevator at a venue or going to dinner after you get off work. And that is unacceptable. Honestly, all that being said, as an adult in this situation, my biggest fear is not for myself, it's for the implications of how much less safe the children and young adults in this sport are, who commonly end up in largely unsupervised situations with individuals who are known to be predators.
Thank you so much, Essene, for sharing. It's really sad that you had to go through that and that you continue to fight. So while doing research for this panel, I believe it was Molly who sent us a report by Anna Maria Liu, which was shocking, actually. And as we read through that, we thought that there would be 3 parts to the problem. One would be identifying the misconduct, one would be reporting, and then the third would be consequences. So many times people who go through abuse are very young and they're unaware of this. So the key to preventing abuse in the first place is awareness. So Monica, given that you started fencing at a very young age, do you think that as a young athlete, you were provided with enough awareness or education to identify abuse or misconduct? Do you think we lack in this area, and how can we improve?
No, definitely. No one was really teaching me these things. Obviously, we didn't have Safe Sport at the time. We didn't have to do all those presentations. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I didn't really have any of sexual harassment situations. I would actually say, if anything, I would have them more actually being older. There's been referees that would make inappropriate comments. One of them actually isn't with us today, but whatever, we don't have to go by his name. But I remember like walking by, and I would try to push these things aside. So I'm trying to come back up with the how it worked. But basically he basically said how he loves watching me walk away. And it didn't make sense to me at the time as like it happened. I was like, what does he mean? And then later it hit me and I was like, oh my God, like he's literally checking me out. That's disgusting. And it's like, okay, fine, maybe you can be attracted to another person, but you don't need to be telling me this, especially as a referee, someone who's deciding my faith on the strip. Like that doesn't make me feel appropriate when I'm fencing, of like, maybe you're looking at my body versus what's happening on the strip. It's not the time and place for that. But like I said, as a child, I definitely wasn't taught anything of what it looks like, but I didn't have that experience, fortunately. How to change it? I mean, like we were saying, I feel like the Safe Sport, same thing, even me. I mean, it takes a lot of time, which I don't have a lot of. So even when I was going through the training, I wasn't watching it. No one's forcing me to do it. I literally had it on play. I came through and I would answer the questions whenever they showed up. Wholeheartedly, I did not watch any of it because it's just a lot of time, like I said, and no one was there to check me. And I mean, I don't know, most of the things can really seem like they're common sense. Maybe it's just like through my education and having conversations that it seems like it makes sense to me, but I don't know. I think some people just don't really think before they speak. And I don't know, somehow making it, I don't know, whether it be like at a competition, you have to go through Safe Sport training. So somebody actually makes sure you're there and actually paying attention. I don't really have the answers for it, but the way that it's working, I don't really think it's effective. Like I said, I mean, I didn't even watch a second of it. So that probably means that it's not effective.
Thanks so much, Monica. Molly, what are your thoughts on providing age-appropriate training to prevent abuse? Like every time you renew your membership, someone has to take like a course or something to renew it. Otherwise, they can't renew their membership.
Sure, it's a good question. And I do think education is important, but there are certainly some logistical issues. I mean, at least for minors, parents usually renew their membership, but even setting that aside, there's no magic barrier at 18 where you're an adult and suddenly you're able to handle all the knowledge about the bad things of the world. And personally, I think these discussions need to be eased in and happen earlier, but who are we as an organization to decide for families when their teenagers are ready for that? So maybe instead of including it in membership, you could make this sort of training optional, but encourage parents to start having these discussions with fencers on how to stay safe at large events. And USA Fencing could provide some materials or videos to help them. Once again, optional, but just help parents out if they're unsure how to have these conversations. And as for adult training, I definitely think that some sort of training should be mandatory, like to attend a competition, like Monica said. But we also can't be complacent with that. Like, that's not a cure-all. People don't pay attention. And while formal training is a strong tool, coaches and officials that have been suspended or banned, or in some cases gotten away with probation or nothing at all, they all took Safe Sport training and it didn't stop them from doing these things. So instead of just training, I think improving diversity, standing up for each other, continuing to have these difficult conversations, as a community, and having appropriate and enforced consequences will help shift the culture in a safer and more positive direction. And above all else, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask USA Fencing and other organizations to not just talk, but set milestones to measure their own progress and goals with us. W Fencing and these Women in Fencing panels are really great initiatives, but people shouldn't have to start their own organizations to actually get leadership to listen and take action.
Thank you so much, Molly. So our next question is for Lorrie. Since you're a member of the ethics committee, can you share with us more details about Safe Sport and then the differences between that and the ethics committee, and then what kind of complaints each one handles?
Sure. And just to take a step back a little bit, I do want to respond to some of the points that have been made to the effect of people think it's a waste of time to file a Safe Sport complaint or another type of complaint about harassment or mistreatment. I really, it's very disturbing to hear that people may feel that. We spend so much time on the board and in the national office dealing with Safe Sport and mistreatment issues. I can tell you, no complaint is wasted. No complaint goes unheard, okay? I mean, I don't want people to hold back from filing a complaint if they think one is appropriate because they think somehow nothing's gonna happen. Every complaint is heard, okay? And we take everyone very seriously. I can tell you that there is almost nothing that we take more seriously than these sorts of complaints, okay? So I really want people to believe that. It has to be confidential, a lot of the Safe Sport work. And to a certain extent, that's a shame because it's not really seen by the membership. But I really want all of the women out there, every person, member, athlete, referee, coach out there to realize this is real and this is an avenue for this to be addressed. There's the US Center for Safe Sport, and then there's our processes in USA Fencing, both the ethics committee and the Safe Sport process. So I just really want to say that from my heart. I want you to know that, all of the women listening today and others, okay? So back to the question. There is a tremendous amount of information on the website about Safe Sport. And I know it can be kind of confusing when you're just thinking about it conceptually, what's Safe Sport, what's the ethics committee, what kind of complaint is this, where should it go, that sort of thing. That should not hinder anybody in trying to proceed if they've got a situation that they would like to report. There's a really good flow chart in terms of what type of complaint is this, where is it going to go, how's it going to be handled, all the different steps in the process. Generally speaking, any kind of complaint that pertains to some sort of sexual incident goes to the US Center for Safe Sport, which handles complaints pertaining to all the NGBs, sexual complaints for all the NGBs. So not just USA Fencing, but all the other Olympic NGBs. Non-sexual complaints will come through the national office. The national office will determine is it an ethics complaint, meaning like a conflict of interest, sometimes a code of conduct. Is it another kind of complaint that the national office will handle? But there's a lot on the website about what constitutes Safe Sport, what's disciplinary, what's ethics, where it goes, and what all the different steps are. And so I would encourage everybody to take a look at that and just familiarize themselves a little bit, because these are resources and people should be using them, and we take it very seriously.
Thank you so much, Lorrie. That's really helpful information. So I think one of the major problems that women face when reporting abuse is sort of like victim shaming. They're scared of like repercussions or something like that. So when we were looking at the survey by Anna Maria Liu, we noticed that only 4% of people who experienced abuse or harassment reported it to USA Fencing or Safe Sport. So Adriana, you're a coach and a referee. So if one of your students goes through any misconduct or abuse somewhere and comes to you for advice, do you feel that USA Fencing has provided a safe and supportive environment? And would you encourage them to report it? Adriana, did she drop? Okay, we will move to the next question for now. So Lorrie, USA Fencing has adopted a zero tolerance policy towards like racial acts, sexual misconduct, and harassment. Is there like a rubric for assigning like punishments to things like that?
A rubric for assigning punishments. I can say no, there's no rubric. I mean, it really is done on a case by case basis. I think that is, we have discussed this. I think that's most appropriate because really every single one of these situations stands alone. I mean, obviously the more of these sorts of cases that we get and complaints that we get, there may be some similarities, but I think each one is on a case by case basis. I did want to add a follow-up that I meant to mention in response to the last question, and it relates to a point that Monica made, which is I agree education is very, very important. I mean, and we're doing everything we can as far as that goes. Is education enough? I mean, I know we're having some debate about that in this call, but we are planning on in-person training at national events once we get to the point in the COVID pandemic that we can do that. But yeah, we have talked about that quite a bit, and we are planning on rolling that out. And I think that will help to enhance the effectiveness of the education. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lorrie. Our next question is for Essene. So the majority of abuse is experienced by women, and once it's reported, there's a committee that decides the consequences. So in your experience, were there enough women on these committees, and were women of color also represented?
So I will preface my response to this question by saying that my experiences are limited to the process with the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. But in talking to colleagues who've also been through that process, it does seem like my experiences are fairly standard. So for that process, once you submit a complaint, there is zero transparency regarding who is handling that complaint and how or when. Nominally, you're supposed to be notified when they're going to contact the other party for obvious reasons, although that rarely happens. There is also supposed to be protection from retaliatory harassment, but so far the common experience is that instead there is zero protection against that from either U.S. Center for Safe Sport or U.S. Fencing. I would like to respond to the points that Lorrie made earlier regarding the well-intentions of the leaders in U.S. Fencing. I understand that this is a difficult topic and no one wants to deal with this, whether they're experiencing it personally or they happen to be an elected official or an appointed official. No one wants to deal with this. I understand that. Least of all, the people who experience it. And I don't think anyone on this call is naive enough to think that people who sexually assault other people are just lacking education. They're lacking consequences. No one in this call, environment, sport wakes up in the morning and says, I think it's morally okay to sexually assault people. It's not an education issue. It's a consequences issue. If my company had no consequences, we would have issues like US Fencing has. But unless we stop pretending it's not also a consequences issue, we're not going to fix anything. So I hear you that you don't think that's the perception that, safe sport's a waste of time. But when I have colleagues who have been harassed in retaliation for reporting sexual assault, and US Fencing's answer is, it's not our problem to deal with. You can go home if you want, and we won't hire you until you feel safer coming back or this all blows over. That's not acceptable. It's not good enough. Do better.
Thank you so much, Essene. Adriana, I think you're back, so we'll just go back to your question really quickly.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. So our question was, you're a coach and a referee. So if one of your students goes through any misconduct or abuse and comes to you for advice, do you feel that USA Fencing has provided a safe environment for you to encourage your student to report it?
Okay, I cannot respond for USA fencing because I live abroad, and it wouldn't be fair for me. I was once working at a national competition of yours, but it's not my place to make an opinion of that for only attending once. So I can only tell you by the experience of my own country. We have some similarities. Of course, this is a world issue, and it goes across every culture and country and environment and everything. I think, though, in our country, we have like a more macho thing going on in everything. We don't have so many nothing. I would say it's not safe for women to walk in the street. You know, it's kind of, the problem is kind of bigger for us. So I can answer your question. What I would do in my own country, I don't think. Honestly, I don't think there is anything in our federation, not only in the fencing federation, but also in our national committee, that we actually know where to go if we have any kind of complaint. Probably there is, but if you don't take the information especially to the women and to the young women, to know what to do if you are in some of these horrible situations, then it's not good enough, because you can have the best things in theory, but if you don't know what to do once this happens to you, or if you think you're in some sort of how would you say, like, threat of this happening to you, then it's not good enough and it's not working. So the reality is, as a coach, what I would do is I would try to always, it's what we do, unfortunately, it's don't go alone to places. Always try to have someone you can trust to be with and to tell. But honestly, anything you can say is not good in your country, federation, or you can think in our country it's worse. So the only advice I could give is, of course, always trust that they're telling the truth, because sometimes they are questioning if but are you sure? You know, that kind of question always comes up. But are you sure? Are you not misinterpreting what the situation was? Or try to make you think twice about what happened. So first of all, you know, acknowledging that if someone is saying this, it's because it's true, and then try to avoid any kind of situations with this person again, and try to talk to the few people that you know that will have the same answer, the same response. And you know, it's more like a thing that goes not through sorry for my English, through channels that are there, like filing things or anything, but you have to go face to face to try to solve the situation, if you know what I mean. It's more like addressing to the person and say, what did you do? And then maybe if the father heard about this and they want to punch in the face. Unfortunately, it goes like this. And it shouldn't, because anonymity, as one of you said before, it's really important, so that the person can feel safe to file what is needed to be filed, and to act, I don't know, maybe later. Of course, all the consequences come later. It's hard to do something to prevent, but at some point that someone will have to face the consequences of what they did.
So sort of a follow-up to that. So you're an FIU referee. So is that any different on an international level?
Well, there is more of you know, it's not as bad as it is in my own country. As a saber referee, I think it's more like a male thing. You know, the saber referees have to be men. It's really, it's not like you have the safe sports, everything you want, but in the end, if they have to take care of the guys who need to be always in the top 8 in the finals. So I don't think any women can feel very confident if they have to file anything, because they try to take care of always of the men that have to deal with certain situations that no one else can. So I don't know actually, except for what Monica said before, that I completely agree 100%, because we all suffer this kind of situations with that particular person. But I guess at that time, even if there was the safe sports and everything, they needed the guy. So what can we think that would have happened in that case? Maybe someone would talk to him and say, hey, you know, but unfortunately, it's the human resources in fencing are not very, very high. It's not like you can replace some people like that. So I don't trust the process. If you know, I never knew someone who had actually a very hard situation or anything apart from these kinds of comments. So I cannot tell you for sure for something that actually happened. But I question myself, and I don't know what would they do if something happens. So if I have this kind of insecurity, maybe some other have. What if this happens? What shall I do? You know, I honestly don't know. It's a question mark.
Thank you so much, Adriana. So recently we heard some good news. There are more women who have been assigned positions in USA Fencing. So Molly, do you think that having more women in decision-making positions will help change this landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the data again from W Fencing, in addition to the raw numbers, we did research on how women leaders affect sports in a positive manner. So for example, female athletes coached by women are 4 times as likely to stay in coaching if they start coaching themselves. And for decision-making positions, women have been shown to hire candidates more equally by gender than men. And beyond creating a more equitable hiring process, a more diverse leadership influences culture too. Representation not just empowers the next generation, but leads to better representation of viewpoints and experiences when it comes time to make decisions that affect everyone. And these decisions further shape our culture as a community. Having colleagues and peers that look or act differently than you makes you more open to new ideas and more accepting and understanding of others. And these problems suddenly no longer affect just a handful, but a good portion of the population, or in the case of gender, half. I also want to respond to Lorrie a bit, and I definitely agree that it's important to report as any incident. But as a female official, I can also tell you that my friends and peers and I don't have a lot of confidence that enough will be done if we do report. This is an insane statement, but I've been lucky enough to only be harassed and not assaulted at tournaments. But I know too many friends who have left the sport or have considered such because they didn't feel protected or that consequences were appropriately enforced. At one NAC, I sat beside a strip with a colleague to make sure our friend felt safe from retaliation as she refereed. And that's really not okay. She took the step to report and still wasn't getting what she needed to confidently work in a safe environment. So to finish up, going back once again to Anna Maria's great survey, to put it plainly, when 60% of women in fencing have been sexually harassed and 20% have been sexually assaulted at tournaments, maybe something will get done about it if there are more women with these experiences in power.
Thank you so much, Molly. To have more women in the decision-making process, I think we need to have more women in the sport itself. So Monica, what do you think is the biggest barrier in driving visibility of our sport, and in particular women in our sport?
I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with women at that point to bring women into the sport. I think visibility of fencing is extremely lacking. I think overall, like, a lot needs to change. Fencing needs to become cool for people want to do it. The more mainstream of sport is, the more people are doing it, the more people want to be doing it, right? Like when I was a kid doing it, I mean, we had like maybe 20 people. I think the one year at Division 1, I don't remember what the year this was, we had 25 women in the event. That's crazy. So yes, we've come a long way, but we're still so far from it. And fencers are doing incredible things. And I think, and I've spoken to US Fencing about this, I think a thing that could be done that would help is, I mean, what is posting like the last touch of Y10 fencing doing for the sport? Nobody understands it. The kids don't understand it. And it's at that point, it's just kids fencing. It's not cool for the people to be starting it, right? Like, that's not what kids think is cool when they're looking at a 10-year-old doing it. They're looking at like the cool moves that Miles is doing, the cool moves Race is doing. I don't know, me, for example. And like US Fencing, I think should be reposting the things that we do. I mean, Miles was in a Nike commercial or campaign. He did that champagne campaign. He's doing Red Bull stuff. So that should be the stuff that's being posted on US Fencing. Race walked in an Hermes thing. He did the Gap campaign or Banana Republic or both. Like none of that's being broadcasted on US Fencing. And I think it's crazy that I, for example, have more followers than US Fencing, where US Fencing encompasses all of these amazing athletes that are doing these things. Ipti is doing incredible things. Marcil was on Chop. That wasn't on US Fencing. I was on a Nickelodeon show. Like this is what, when people Google it, this is what we should be showing up is US Fencing's platform of what they're doing and be like, oh my God, look what this fencer. And then ultimately it's helping us grow. And it's just about the entire community growing. And I think one of the biggest problems with US Fencing, or not US Fencing in general, but like fencing, is that everybody kind of does their own thing and no one shares and no one's a community. There's no like, okay, somebody has, like it's even kept a secret about sponsorships. Like I remember being at the Olympics and somebody signed a campaign. I was like, oh my God, like, how did you do that? Can you help? And they're like, oh, they just like came to me. Oh, okay. So this major company just came to you, showed up and they gave you an offer. Like that's a lie. Why aren't we helping each other? Why aren't we helping each other grow? Do I feel more comfortable going to an athlete from another sport to ask for help? Like I don't know if you guys have heard of Clubhouse, but it's this new thing and it's like a great way to be growing for different many reasons. It would have to be a whole thing for me to explain what it is, but it's a great way to be meeting people. And I met Norris Frederick. He has a bronze medal, I think, from the Olympics. He has 287,000 people on Instagram following him. He made $287,000 last year off of Instagram content during a pandemic. And I heard him speaking and I reached out to him. I was like, hi, can you help me? Because I'm not making that kind of money. I'm okay. I have half of your followers, but I was like, but I don't know what to be doing. I don't know who to go for help. This guy took time out of his day, somebody that he just met, to get onto a Zoom call with me to tell me everything that he knows. Like, he was like, I'll bring you, like, if I see any brand deal that fits for you, I'll help you. But that doesn't happen in US Fencing. I get it. We're in the same lane because we're doing fencing, but like, I don't know, like there's a campaign that's going to fit Miles. That's not going to fit me. And that's nothing to say about me. It's just, we're different people. So if I have an opportunity for Miles, I should be bringing it to him. If Miles has an opportunity for me, he should be bringing it to me and we should all be growing. But that's not at all like the mindset of anybody in fencing. For everybody, it's, I'm going to do this. Like, I don't want to give somebody else the opportunities. Like at the Olympics, I asked for help to be able to go to the Nike house. And I was told that it's impossible. I was told by US Fencing that US Fencing doesn't have any way of getting me inside, even though Nike is our sponsor, whatever the situation is now. Meanwhile, I went to a Taekwondo athlete who brought me into the Nike house with no problem. And I saw not every single, but I just don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I saw a lot of people from US Fencing inside the building and their family. And they were telling me they couldn't bring their family in. Because again, God forbid I was in there and I got myself a Nike sponsorship, or I met somebody that could sponsor me. Like I just don't understand why we keep closing these doors and stunting our growth. Fencing is an incredible sport. Whenever I tell anybody about it, or anytime I do I did a campaign with Schwarzkopf. Everybody there on set was like, this is incredible. Why aren't we shooting more of this? Why aren't more companies using fencing? Like, you guys are so cool. And I'm like, I don't even have answers for you. It's because we're not helping ourselves. We're again, closing doors for each other. And I think that's something that needs to change. We need to understand it's a community. Yes, it's an individual sport. I get it. We have that individual mindset, but we're not going to go anywhere for that. We're not helping each other. We're just keeping ourselves in the same space. We're not growing. And it's a sport that, again, just could be so cool. Like I said, anytime I tell anybody about it, they have a million questions. They're asking me about it. They're like, how can I get in? Like, I want my kid to be involved, or like, I can't believe I didn't know about this sport. how did I never even meet anybody in this sport? I'm going to be watching. But like, why is that still happening in this day and age of this sport, with so many medals that we're winning, with so many athletes, like I said, doing incredible things, campaigns for all these different brands? We could be doing more. I don't know if that answered my question, but it gave my concerns.
Thank you so much, Monica. Our next question is for Lorrie. So does USA Fencing have any initiative to sort of bring more visibility to fencing?
Well, we're always, undertaking initiatives to bring more visibility to fencing. I mean, it has been, and obviously an Olympic year is the prime time for doing that. That is when most sports like fencing receive a tremendous amount of opportunity, and that didn't happen last year. So we had to table a lot of our efforts. But moving forward this year towards Tokyo, I think there will be a lot of things that will roll out and will create opportunities for the athletes and the organization. I mean, we're still very much right now, kind of in recovery mode, dealing with various budgetary issues and things like that. And so, but that is all in the works. Yes. I mean, it is a challenge with a sport like fencing, and it's complicated, and it's probably something that, you might want to address on another panel, because we'd be getting way off topic to go into that. But coming back to women in fencing and that sort of thing, I do think I'm a partner in a large international law firm. So I've spent my career in a highly male dominant environment. And I know for sure that when women are in the room, that has an impact. Okay. When women are the deciders in the room with the deciders, that has an impact. And, so I'm not here to tell you everything is, perfect and rosy and all of that, or to, diminish or undermine the points that were made today. But, we really do have good representation of women in our leadership now. 2 of the 3 at-large directors are women. 3 of the 4 athlete reps on the board are women. The chair of the athlete council is a woman. Our executive director is a woman. And if you look at the website and you see who's in the national office, you'll see women are highly represented in all of the positions in the national office. Chairs of the major USA Fencing committees, including ethics, the nominating committee, and also the refs commission, are women. So, things don't happen overnight in terms of change and progress. We all know that, but I think we're moving in a good direction. And I do think this level of representation by women in these important positions will really help. And I can tell you, being in the room at board meetings and committee meetings and things like that, that women are strongly advocating for women in USA Fencing. We really are. And so I want people to believe that and know that, and hopefully, feel good about that.
Thank you so much. Sort of a follow-up to that, are there any school programs or advertising for USA Fencing positions?
So those are 2 different things, right? Are you talking about jobs or?
Yeah, so like, does USA Fencing like do any advertisings, or do they sort of like just like advertising for like positions just to bring more awareness, so more people can like be in the decision-making process, sort of?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for jobs in the national office, that's advertised. And we also, every year, late in the spring, it goes on the website, an email goes out, inviting people to apply for committee positions. And we got a lot of applications last year. I mean, we started doing this about 5 years ago. Prior to that, I don't know, it was just kind of people raised their hand or talked to their friend. When I first came on the board, I said, no, we have a really talented membership. We've got people with all sorts of skills and abilities and knowledge, and we should be bringing them in and getting them involved, and we should be casting out a wider net. And so we started soliciting applications so anybody can apply. And there's an application form, and you express your interest in what kind of committee you want to be on, and why you think you're suited for that committee. And we have a committee on committees of about 5 people, and we go through those all in detail. And we're very conscious of trying to achieve diversity, representation by women, representation by underrepresented groups. And so it's really a nice opportunity if you want to get involved and you want to have a say. I encourage everybody to keep an eye out for that later in the spring. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lorrie. Our next question is for Essene. So what do you think individuals, clubs, coaches, and even colleges, any steps that they can take to bring awareness to the community?
Yeah, so I think the answer to increased awareness also lies in an increase in a different kind of education. What I mean by that is we really need to empower all members of this sport, and especially our most vulnerable members, to not only identify, but like Adriana said earlier, react to instances of misconduct, whether they are the victim or simply a witness. To go back to the contrast between fencing and my day job, when someone walks into my office building, there are standards of behavior and they know that there will be real consequences if those standards are breached. In fencing, everyone knows that there are standards of behavior and they also know that there are zero consequences if they're breached. And until that perception and that reality changes, nothing will change. I've heard so often the response that change takes time. When you're talking about an issue that, based on the statistics that Molly listed earlier, is so common to this sport, what you are saying is that the price of children and women and others in this sport being sexually assaulted, it is okay for that change to happen slowly. I don't agree. I don't think that's acceptable. And the excuse that there's no visibility into the U.S. Center for Safe Sport is an excuse. A little over a year ago, I dug into that and started communicating with officials from the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. And they were willing to come to an arrangement with officials in U.S. fencing to create an environment in which retaliatory harassment, they could have protections. Because right now, the excuse is, we don't know anything about that. We don't know if people are involved in a case. So came to an agreement with U.S. Center for Safe Sport that could have been a solution to that. U.S. fencing said they were on board, and then it just disappeared. So I would like to take this opportunity to challenge the leaders in this sport to actually put in the work that it is going to take to make this sport the safe space that everyone deserves.
If I could just respond to that briefly, just to clarify, I was not suggesting that safe sport takes time. If anybody has a safe sport complaint, they should file that and it will be handled. I was indicating that in terms of getting more leadership for women, more representation for women, more power for women in fencing and in the organization, we're working on that. And I think we're making really good progress. Obviously, there's more work to be done, but that just to make clear the dichotomy there in terms of my point.
Thank you so much, Lorrie and Essene. So that was all the questions that we had. We do have a couple audience questions that we might be able to get through. So we'll just start with the first one, which is from David. So the equality of medals and athletes at Rio in 2016 was an important milestone for the sport. So what are the key next steps for gender equality in fencing? And does that opinion change if your main role is an athlete, referee, official, or coach? And then we'll leave this open for any one of our panelists to answer.
Let's get 50% of the fencers be women.
If I can only say something, it's not only that you have to say that there is like, you have to have 50% or what is in any kind of rule book. It also has to be applied. For instance, in the FIE, it says that in the World Championships, there has to be at least 2 women per weapon refereeing. But in saber, that was not the case in the last World Championships. So the rules could be there, but if no one applies it, I mean, we can take it as a progress, and I think it is, but if it's not happening, then it's nothing. We shouldn't be reading about the progress. We should be seeing the progress, you know? And of course, women have to be given the opportunity of being there, doing a great job, having the fencers trust them because they have experience, and being in the finals and being seen, because you can have the 30% or whatever the milestone that we consider is great, but if you only have the women referees doing the pools, and then you're not seeing them the rest of the day, so what are we really achieving, you know?
Yeah, and to bounce off of that, I think the women referees you mentioned, you know, just doing the pools and not seeing them the rest of the day, don't just assign them to women's events either, you know? I want to see women refereeing both men and women, because it doesn't matter, you know, just as equally skilled.
Thank you so much, Molly and Adriana. So I think that is all of the time that we have today. But thank you so much to all of our panelists for agreeing to speak with us and giving us such valuable insights. We would also like to thank everyone again for attending our panel.
Thank you.